Well, thank you, and thank you for having me on your show. I'm delighted to be here. I think what China is doing from a public health response is pretty spectacular. In fact, my 3 weeks in quarantine, I must admit, was also very necessary because it gave me some time to pause. In Kenya, it was very busy. Kenya has done, again, another country which did outstanding work in terms of the pandemic response. But Kenya also had a challenge of a major locust invasion, the first in 75 years, which was virtually eating away at most of its crops in that year. And then we had major floods. So we were dealing with triple crisis. So that kept us extremely busy. But on all counts, the Kenyan government did a great job. So the 3 weeks that I got in Guangzhou was actually pretty excellent. It gave me time to slow down and, take stock of things. But I have to say that from the moment I got my visa from the Chinese mission in Kenya, the public health system of China kicked in there. So I had to do an IgM test, I had to do my NAT test in Kenya. Then I had a layover in Dubai because it wasn't a direct flight. I flew on Emirates and had to repeat the same tests all over again. At the airport, while checking in Dubai, there were a very rigorous set of assessments of your paperwork done, and you got a green code from the Chinese embassy. We arrived in Guangzhou. And I must say, from the time that I disembarked from, first of all, I was quite impressed with all the Chinese travelers. Everybody, regardless of which class of the plane they were sitting in, were all in PPEs. I just had my face masks, on, but, everybody was in full PPE. And I thought, that people have taken it at an individual level. That sense of discipline was pretty visible amongst most of the Chinese passengers on the plane. Arrived in Guangzhou, I think the meticulousness with which all departments of the airport, it was not just the public health professionals, from the police to the public health professionals to the customs, to every element of the Chinese system that I witnessed in Guangzhou was remarkable. And from there, taken to the hotel, and regardless of my rank, everybody was treated as an equal simply because this virus does not discriminate on your rank and what level you are at. So I'm glad that we were all treated the same way without any special preferences given. So I went into quarantine at the hotel in Guangzhou. And then I started to evaluate this response. In fact, I didn't meet anybody. I just saw two people, once in the morning, once in the evening, and they looked like astronauts because they were fully covered with full PPEs, and they would come and do my temperature tests. And this is what I reflected on when I wrote an article actually about this, that, if every country had a rigorous system of making sure pre-travel arrangements and pre-travel checks are robust, on arrival, a proper system of isolation, quarantine, proper rigorous temperature check. And I think the 3-week timing is actually pretty good, because we've noticed that even the virus has showed up after 16, 17 days when you think that the person does not have it. So it's also the mutative nature. The virus is very new, science is challenged by it, so we are all trying to come to grips with it. So in terms of an overall public health response, I give the Chinese government and the Chinese people, an A+ on the performance from a public health perspective. The future of the world, the future progress of the world will be defined by big data, technology, and innovation. So when I look at, let's say, China's success in eradicating extreme poverty, I believe that today technology and the digital infrastructure will help to accelerate that. So what China achieved in 40 years, we can help Africa achieve that in 10 years, which is the timing of the Agenda 2030. And goal number 1 of the SDGs is to end extreme poverty. So to me, bridging the digital divide is going to be absolutely crucial. And when I went to the Mobile World Congress, I was quite amazed at how China has leapfrogged, given the fact that in 1980 it barely had a digital infrastructure, and today it has a preponderance of it. And I think these are important lessons we can take. But I'll give you a very personal example of where I witnessed a real partnership in Kenya back in 2014 when I worked for UNFPA with the UN Population Fund. Kenya was grappling with a situation of very, very high maternal mortality in the country. In fact, Kenya was considered amongst the 10 most dangerous places for a woman to give birth. The president of Kenya said, we have to change this. So there was a strong political action taken by the president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, and his wife, Margaret Kenyatta, who said, no, we cannot afford to have women dying at childbirth. And if you remember, that was the period of the Millennium Development Goals. And MDG 5 was about bringing the maternal mortality rates down to 170, less than 170 deaths per 100,000 live births. Kenya was at about 500 deaths per 100,000 live births. So we went there. I looked at what those figures were, and we went and started to analyze the data, county by county. And we found that 15 counties contributed to 98% of the deaths. So we knew that of the 47 counties, where we needed to focus. And we knew that, okay, now these are the 15. In that 15, there were 6 that actually contributed to 50% of the deaths. 6 companies joined me and said, we will work with you in these counties to change this. And that started with Huawei back in 2014. Philips from the Netherlands, Merck from the United States of America, GlaxoSmithKline from the UK, Safaricom Foundation from Kenya, and the Kenya Healthcare Federation, and the Kenyan Red Cross, which has the might and the bandwidth of getting to the last mile, said, we will also join this. Now, this partnership, under the leadership of the government of Kenya, in 2.5 years, we reduced the maternal deaths by 1/3. Now, in many countries, this would have taken anywhere from 10 to 15 years, what we accomplished in Kenya in 2.5 years. Which goes to show why public-private partnerships are going to be absolutely crucial in accelerating the SDGs, but that would be driven by technology. Today, you can go to a slum in Kenya, to the informal settlement, and you will have a midwife who's connected with Huawei technology, having a backpack with Philips equipment in her back, and she's able to go household to household to do checks. It's like if you recall, the barefoot doctors of China. Only thing, these are a group of technologically savvy people who are going and doing that. In fact, to me, the future of public health and preventative health will be through an army of technologically savvy community health workers being able to prevent, because this is not the last pandemic of COVID-19. There are more to come. But what this pandemic has shown us is how important public health is. And therefore, the digital infrastructure will define the development of nation states. So it's going to be the digital bridge and road initiative too, which needs to come together, because when we unite the world through digital technology, we will find there is a better confluence, there is better preparedness, there is better early warning, there are better responses to a public health measure. The fact that I can actually have a phone on which I have all my health data and that I'm able to find out, which is a hotspot area that I need to avoid is fascinating. And I believe that, if the future of the world of development will be defined by the technological landscape. So this is what I saw at the Mobile World Conference, and I was just, I was like a child in a candy shop, because it was amazing to see what was at display over there, and the ingenuity and the innovativeness of young people, not just in China but from across the world who had converged there. And we had very, very interesting discussions, and I really want to thank Huawei in particular for having invited me there, because otherwise I would not have known there is this level of enterprise and innovation which is already existent in this country. Well, first of all, let me take this opportunity to congratulate China for having achieved something which is quite a remarkable milestone of ending rural poverty, and this despite the fact that 2020 we had seen a major economic slowdown. We are seeing an economic crisis that rivals the Great Depression of the 1930s. And in that period, China has had a pretty robust extreme poverty eradication program. So let me congratulate the country for what it has done. And I believe that it has many important lessons to share, because given the fact that China itself came out of abject extreme poverty not too long ago, but what it has shown is, with a population of this size of 1.4 billion people, it's possible to do it. So there are 3 lessons that we could actually share with the rest of the world. Number 1, it is political will, and political will right at the highest level. President Xi Jinping has firmly believed that he wants to end poverty. He has therefore ensured that that political will has traveled to every layer of Chinese governance. The second is the right public policy. Now, without robust public policies, it will not help engender the kind of change we want to see. So therefore, how do we bring, again, innovation, technology, the right guidance from a public policy perspective to make it happen? But the third is the most important, and this is an aspect that will cover the whole world. Regardless of how developed a country is, it is going to be about partnerships and new types of partnerships. The Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed, often says, in this decade of action of 2030, where we have to achieve the SDGs, we have to flip the orthodoxy. It can't be business as usual. We have to do it differently. So she has told all the 130 resident coordinators all over the world, their firm marching order is, it's not business as usual. We have to do something different. And let me say this, what COVID-19 has done, it struck the world like a bolt of lightning. And in that lightning, in that flash, we are seeing the contours of inequality that has emerged. And those contours of inequality are in the most advanced countries in the world, where you thought nobody's poor there. And yet those contours became visible. It was within countries, it was inside countries. It was, so I think those are the issues that we as the United Nations, we as a multilateral system are trying to find solutions to. You've seen, who would have thought that Western countries, where the health systems are seen as the gold star, their public health systems, became, they felt vulnerable to the impact of this virus. So it means that we need to reinforce and re-strategize our public health systems. And this can't be done by one country alone. If one country, one community, one village, one individual is unsafe, everybody is unsafe, because the velocity of the travel of these pandemics, these viruses, it's invisible. We can't see it. But the speed with which it travels at the same speed as anybody else does, in fact faster. It has penetrated places where nobody can get in, and yet it has got to heads of state. So which means that we have to be united, and this calls for an entirely new spirit of multilateralism. And I'm looking forward to working with the Chinese government and Chinese leadership to renew this form of multilateralism, because public health is going to define the future of human development, just as education has. Absolutely. So in fact, the United Nations system in China has a partnership with the government of China, which is called the United Nations Cooperation Framework. And this will define what the next 5 years are. The UN family will work with the government of China to look at those places where the government of China and us can come together to deal with those issues of inequality. Our principle, the Sustainable Development Goals, is the North Star. It's about leaving no one behind. And that is our intention, that where there are those gaps is to address those gaps, work down to the provinces, down to the village, work there to make sure that nobody is left behind, because we want to make sure that these lessons that China has learned must be shared with the rest of the world, and in particular Africa, where I've spent a major part of my career. I believe Africa is the future. That continent, by 2050, will have 2.3 billion people. 900 million will be young people in that continent. It is where the future of consumption and production is going to happen. It is where the youngest population of the world currently is. I'll give you an example. I served in Kenya before coming. The median age of Kenya is 18. The median age of Sweden is 47. Kenya's population was the same as Sweden in 1956, 7 million. Sweden is 10.9 million, Kenya is 47.6 million. By 2050, Kenya's population will double. By 2050, all of Africa's population will double. It's at about 1.1, 1.2 billion right now. But here comes the opportunity. With the rest of the world which is aging, all of Western Europe, China, Asian tigers, the US, here is where we need to invest now. But the most important investment will be in making sure that people are healthy, people are educated, and people are equal. And when I'm talking about equality, I'm talking about the full empowerment of the girl child, that she can achieve her full human potential. Today, the expectations, the vision, the ambition of a 10-year-old girl in Shanghai is very different from the vision and the expectations of a 10-year-old girl in Niger, is very different from the vision and the expectation of a 10-year-old girl in South Sudan, is very different from a 10-year-old girl in London or in New York. The 10-year-old in Shanghai, the 10-year-old in London, the 10-year-old in New York is looking at a life of what she will be educated in, what kind of a career path she will be taking. A 10-year-old girl in Niger or in South Sudan or in many parts of the world are trying to ward off being married off. Their life comes to a standstill because by 10 or 11 or 12, they are getting into early marriage. And those are cultural issues. Those are traditional harmful practices where the UN is committed to work with. But again, China can stand up as a model of that, because the safeguarding of women's rights and their equality is going to be crucial if we want to see progress. If we want to see socio-economic progress. Every part, the Western Europe, the US, all of them, China, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, are great examples. Singapore, great examples where women and men at the household level are working. A woman can plan her family. There is more disposable income, better education for the children, better health for the children, better nutrition for the children, and therefore you raise a human capital which becomes the finest creators of technology in Shenzhen or in the Silicon Valley. And that is because of the investments that parents were able to make, because they had disposable income. But just imagine, turn that around and they had 10 children. And I think this is where the human development part is going to be crucial. This will therefore provide the firm base for the success or the future of an Africa, a continent, which is going to be, I have seen Kenya. To me, Kenya is a microcosm of what the potential of Africa is. In fact, in Kenya, the blueprint of Africa's future is being laid. The sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, these are parts of the world where the population will be about 700 million by 2050. But they can actually, if we do the right structural adjustments, they will have a double-digit economic growth. But they will not grow in isolation. Economies are interdependent. There is no decoupling of economies. Try as hard as you may. Economies cannot get decoupled. Economies are interdependent. And here is where the future of the new renewal of multilateralism will be, is how can we as the UN family work with China, work with other member states, bring together public-private partnerships and look at a way that we can transform Africa. And there are many African leaders like Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya, like Paul Kagame of Rwanda, all of them with an ambition, with a spirit that they want to see a growth. The Africa Free Trade Area again is an important opportunity for Chinese investments to now come in, because the free trade area will not succeed if Africa is not connected digitally and infrastructure. So, first of all, I have to say that I'm privileged to work under UN Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres, who has made climate one of his most urgent and important priorities. In fact, he is the center at which the entire United Nations system is being reformed, because he's making the UN fit for purpose to work with member states to be able to deal with climate issues, with development issues, with issues around poverty, with issues around peace. And he calls it the triple nexus of peace, development, and humanitarian action. Today, over 75 million people. This is the largest displacement of people which has taken place post the Second World War. It is displacement because of instability. It is displacement because of violence, but it's also displacements because of a climate emergency. And therefore, Secretary General Guterres has declared a climate emergency and said that this is absolutely unacceptable, that we should be actually living on the cusp. It's an existentialist threat. President Xi Jinping has recently said that he wants to make China carbon neutral by 2060. I believe that as the United Nations family, we will work with the Chinese government to achieve that particular aim. In fact, I was just now in Shanghai, where I met with the Bao Steel Company, and I met the chairman of the Bao Steel Company. Now, steel companies are major polluters, and they have made a commitment that by 2050, they will go green as a steel company. Now, when you have CEOs, when you have corporate leaders that make that commitment, and that is why I come back to that point, when political will, public policy and partnerships converge, magic happens. Just the kind of magic we are seeing in China, in the Asian tigers, parts of Africa, parts of the world. This is why we need China's leadership, and I'm glad that the United States of America under President Biden has come back to the Paris Club as the two largest economies. I believe that China and the US, together with the entire multilateral framework, could make a huge difference in this major existentialist threat that we confront. And that is the climate emergency that the Secretary General has reminded us of. So there are, I just recently wrote an article in Forbes about what I'm hoping as the new resident coordinator in China to achieve with the UN country team in partnership with China. South-South cooperation is going to be absolutely important. We will need South-South cooperation and global cooperation in preventing a future pandemic. Public health must have a united approach. So that is going to be absolutely critical. Yet in Africa, by 2030, the healthcare business is expected to grow to $400 billion. Imagine what an opportunity it is that when people are able to consume good quality healthcare, preventative health, not only do we develop human capital, but we also make it profitable and sustainable. The second area is agriculture. Agriculture was one of the foundations that led China coming out of poverty. In fact, because of the agricultural revolution, we've seen a dramatic drop of people in poverty. But agriculture grown in isolation, if it is not connected to the entire value chain with roads, airports, cold chains, that agriculture. So one of the challenges that we have in Africa is post-harvest loss. There is about 40% of post-harvest loss of agricultural product. Africa is very much capable of not only feeding itself, but feeding the world. And that agro-business in Africa is expected to go to about $1 trillion by 2030. Another huge opportunity for the UN and China and the world to come and work so we make the world food secure. The third area is in the entire leapfrogging of the second and third. Many African countries have missed the second and third industrial revolution. We go into the fourth industrial revolution, the digital revolution, the blue economy, where Kenya is a major champion and a leader in the blue economy space. We hosted a blue economy conference with Kenya in 2018. It was remarkable, that we had over 17,000 people that came to that conference. It was co-hosted with Japan and Canada. And we see that as a huge opportunity. It's not just the oceans, it's the rivers, the lakes that we have a potential opportunity to harvest. I mean, today Australia is talking about a blue economy of, instead of growing wheat, can we actually use seaweed into the making of bread and flour? That means you will start to reduce the carbon footprint of that. So again, the manufacturing sector is going to be crucial. Let me give you another example, and one of Kenya's president's priorities is affordable housing, for example. Now, in Kenya alone, at this moment when we speak, there's a need of about 2 million affordable housing. And affordable housing means that a poor person is able to go live in dignity. And a house provides dignity, not a tent, not a plastic sheet. It's a house. So President Kenyatta said he wants to have 500,000 houses, and I had an opportunity to talk to him. I said, look, 500,000 houses, in a period of 2 to 3 years is going to be quite a hard push to be able to achieve that. But if we were to go for 3D printed technology, maybe there's a way out, or prefabricated housing. And then I started to have a conversation with the Chinese ambassador to Kenya, then Ambassador Wu Peng, who's now the Director General for Africa at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China. Ambassador Wu Peng put me in touch with the BUCG company. I had a conversation with them, and we started a discussion with the Ministry of Housing and Infrastructure, with the Minister James Macharia. And we said, what is it that we can do to accelerate affordable housing? BUCG has a 3D printed house on a way to Kenya. It's on a ship right now as we speak, so it should be getting to Kenya soon. Now, it depends on how it is understood by the people. But if we can industrialize housing, that means this is artificial intelligence, which is putting those houses in place, but you'll need an army of plumbers, masons, carpenters who will now need to go pit the doors, get those houses ready. Can you imagine that if we were to go for 10 million, 15 million, 20 million affordable houses, it will start to also bring the cost down. Economics tells us that, when you go for, economies of scale, you start to bring those houses. So you make those houses really affordable by using technology. So I see incredible opportunities where we could look at South-South cooperation using the digital bridge to advance that. So areas of agriculture, in public health, in affordable housing, in manufacturing. But the bottom line to this is we must ensure the equality of women. This is the country where the Beijing platform was held in 1995. It is to make sure that we have a generation that is equal. It is to make sure that women and girls are empowered to achieve their full human potential. So investment in health, investment in education will be the key drivers to that dramatic transformation that we need. And I think we can also learn important lessons from how China was able to swing very quickly from physical schooling to digital schooling. And I think that is going to be the real game changer in many parts of Africa.